So, Opposition Leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar, thank you so much for inviting us to your office. This is, of course, where it all started.
Yeah, certainly, and I thank you for making the trip down. You see what I have to do in my life. You know, we had a function here recently, Diwali function, and several ambassadors visited, attended, and one of them asked me, "So what do? You come from here to Port of Spain? Where do you live?" I said, "I live between here and Port of Spain, so I can commute." But this is where it all began. In fact, I launched my campaign out of this yard in when was that? The year 2009, and then that internal election was in 2010. So yes, it began here, and it's still here. The activity continues. Earlier, before you came, Irashi, we had a lot of little preschool children. I was mentioning to you, and it was so wonderful that they asked to come and to sing and do some carols for us.
But of course, before you assumed leadership of the United National Congress, before you became Prime Minister, you started off as Member of Parliament for Siparia. That was, of course, in 1995. You've been undefeated since. When you look around at your office, what sort of memories come back to you when you think about those early days?
But before I became an MP, you may remember I was an alderman, what was then known as the St. Patrick County Council in the heart of Siparia. So I didn't have this office then. In those days, councils and aldermen did not have offices. That was one of the changes that we made when we went to government, to give councillors an office and let them at least have one member of staff. So what memories come from here? All the memories. The good, the bad, and the ugly all emanated from Siparia, and the good and the bad and the ugly remains in Siparia in a sense. But Siparia has always been so supportive, as you said, and I have very, very fond and loving memories from the people and from the activities. We've had almost every kind of activity you can think of coming out of this office, legal aid clinics, medical clinics, and then the festivities, Diwali, Christmas, Carnival even. We had some challenges in the COVID period when the country was on lockdown, but yes, began here and continues here, and will continue with the blessings of the Lord.
Of course, now a borough, what do you envision for the future of Siparia?
Well, first of all, it's a fallacy. It was just a name change. And by being the borough of Siparia has made no difference to anything. In law, there is no change. It's just a name change. One may say that it gives us a kind of status to call yourself a borough, but the services have not improved. Financing does not improve. Nothing. So it's a name change. Instead, the council has to spend money, the corporation has to spend money to do what? Name change on all their vehicles, their buildings, all their departments, their letterheads even. So it costs a few $1 million, which the work has begun, but no money has been allocated by government. So to call Siparia borough has made no difference to any improvement in the goods and services provided to the people of Siparia. That was merely a political gimmick, in my respectful view.
In any event, what do you envision, what do you hope for, ideally, for this place that you call yours, that you call home?
But there are many things. First of all, Siparia has been negatively impacted with the shutdown of Petrotrin, because large facilities out in Palo Seco have all been shut down, including the very huge stadium and sports ground that was down there. With that shutdown, it has impacted the business community of Siparia, because that was the mainstay of the economy in Siparia. So you say, what do I envisage? I would like us to work on getting things done that will again bring back life to the economy. If you drive down into Siparia now, it is like a ghost town. You will get traffic, yes. And part of that traffic, of course, of Rashi is because they did not complete the highway. So everybody has to demit the road at Davey Junction, and everybody heading further south has to come down on this SS road all the way down to Palo Seco, Santa Flora, and those places. What do I envisage, or what would I like to see? We have to do things with respect to the economy. As with the rest of the country, infrastructure is the worst that you can see. And economy doesn't just mean business, it means jobs. There have been so many job losses. You will ask me, what do I envisage? I envisage this not just for Siparia, but for Trinidad and Tobago. Throughout the country, the job losses have been massive, and they've been worst in the Southland because of the shutdown of Petrotrin as a major factor. Job creation, there's no new revenue stream, no, nothing new being done to create jobs that will bring in a revenue stream. You'll ask me, what can Siparia do? We have the very famous Daisy Vonce Center. The corporation built up that place there. We would want to see more of that in terms of tourists, outside tourists coming into the Southland. Daisy Vonce was famous and remains famous. That is one thing we can do. We, under my administration in Siparia, we built a huge ground for football, for cycling, and there's also swimming in the heart of Siparia. That has been totally underutilized and not maintained. I would like to see that. I remember growing up as a child, that ground, Siparia, the savannah was opposite my home at that time. Still is, of course, not this present home, but my home growing up. And there was always some activity there. We would have cycling. Cyclists would come from all over the country for that cycling track that was there. I put back that track and we did. It's not being used, okay? You have an actual football, the football ground. There was always something happening. And then you would have all kinds of activity with people coming into Siparia. Siparia is famous for the Deltone steel pan. The Deltones had their steel pan behind my house in Siparia. And they too, carnival activity, everything has gone total standstill. So those are some of the things I see that can be done, but I think one of the most important is looking for revenue streams and job creation, not just here, but throughout our country.
Let's move now, if you don't mind, to major national issues affecting the country. First and foremost will be crime. We see the murder rate continuing to increase, although it's a little bit lower than last year. Are you satisfied with that?
Certainly not. One murder, one home invasion is one too many. I don't think the government is paying much attention to the crime. Let me take you into the anti-crime talks that we had proposed to be done. In spite of my various correspondences dating back from October 14th, we are now in December, there has been no response, not even the courtesy of a reply from the government with respect to getting those things off the ground, and the crime continues unabated. Apart from that, recently you notice I've been talking about the age for marijuana use, the age for gambling. I talked about on Monday night about the whole issue of the sexual abuse of minors and of teenagers. Those areas are all related to the crime. The government's approach is lock up more people. They're focused, you know, obsessed with no bail legislation. They focus on that, but that's not the issue. That is all after the fact. What can we do before the crimes have been committed? These were some of the issues we wanted to raise with the government in the anti-crime talks. In fact, we sent some of the proposals to government. Those were some of the things we would like to see happening, that we don't just deal with the crime from this myopic view of lock up people, lock them up, no bail, no bail, no bail. And you've heard the government crying. That has been their cry for the past how many years. The opposition will not support the anti-crime legislation. First of all, that is not true. But I'll come back to that point in a moment. It's that we have to look at preventative measures as well. And I talked about the Selwyn Ryan report, a 437-page document compiled by the late Professor Selwyn Ryan and several other very influential people in terms of academia, in terms of security. And we had implemented some of those, but some still remain outstanding, which would help us with the preventive aspects. He recommended things to do with work in the schools, what we could do in schools, what we can do with children after they leave school, when you finish school at 2:30 or 3 p.m. We had introduced, in fact, based on some of that, homework centers. We have suggested that places of worship, every community has a place of worship, a church, a mosque, or a mandir, can be used after school from 2:30 to 3 p.m., where children's parents are out working, can be used until 6 p.m., for example, with mentors and guidance officers there, can be used on weekends. You know, within the community there will be safe places that the children can be instead of out on the streets. There's so many, I said, they say we don't support anti-crime. I've been painstakingly been stating, look at how many pieces of legislation. And therefore, again, it is a very myopic view that it is legislation that will solve crime. When the Prime Minister suggested the crime talks, we agreed. Prime Minister wanted to restrict it only to legislation. But we have thousands of legislation in our statute books, and that's not the way to go. All the legislation is to do with after you have committed the crime. What do we have in place for before the crime is committed in terms of nurturing young minds and so on? I think we too focused, as I say, on lockup legislation.
Given all the trials and tribulations, even to get these crime talks started, do you expect anything formidable to come out of it?
You mean substantial? Well, that is formidable too, of course, substantially formidable. Apparently, no talks are not going anywhere. So what our party has decided to do, and I already have our 3 deputy leaders crafting that proposal for us as to where we'll go and when, we are going to start anti-crime talks in the country. We'll go out and talk to the stakeholders and talk to anybody who wishes to come. We will start our own anti-crime talks. We will not sit and wait for the government to continue to find reasons not to have the crime talks.
So your talks will essentially be with the people?
With the people.
Where does it go from there?
Once we get, well, where does it go from there? Let's take it step by step. When we get those, of course, we send it to government, we share it with civil society, and from there where it goes to the next election. Those will be our proposals to combat crime, to help the fight against crime, in the fight against crime. Because the present government seems totally incapable of dealing with the crime crisis in the country. So step by step, we share it with the government and we share it with civil society. And we wait until the day comes to vote this government out of office and to implement proper crime fighting mechanisms. Actually, sorry, if I may take pause here. When we were in government, we brought serious crimes down in that 5-year period to the lowest in 3 decades. In 3 decades, 30 years, we brought the serious crimes down. So we have a track record. Of course, some of those policies may work still, but we do have others, and we will get more when we go to the stakeholders and have these conversations in the country.
Of course, very often, Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, when you speak, your critics would say, they are talking now. Why did they not do it while in office? How do you respond?
Well, that's a very simple answer. We had 5 years in office. And there's so many things we did. As I said, we brought the serious crimes down in those 5 years to the lowest in 3 decades. We grew the economy. GDP was at the highest. Our foreign exchange earnings were at the highest. Now we are in minus forex, you know. During our period, it was about $40 billion in forex and foreign direct earnings, FDI, foreign direct investment, came into TNT. Since this government has come in, we have gone into minus FDI. You know what that means? There's an outflow. There's an outflow. People are leaving and fleeing. So yes, 5 years as compared to I don't know how many years our opponents have had, we did a lot, and it will take us a long time for me to continue to repeat what these are. But the economy grew. We created over 50,000 new jobs. We did that without a single new tax, not one new tax. FDI, our road infrastructure. We developed hospitals, schools, over 106 schools we built. And we left many others in almost complete, some 80–90% complete. Right here in my constituency, there are 2 massive structures that are all now covered in bush, where the windows have gone, the doors have gone, whatever was in them, vandalized and just lying there. I think there's some vagrants living in them now. They were almost complete and just gave up on them. When we talked about 106 schools built, they asked us, well, where are they? And one day, our former Minister of Education in Parliament, he got up and he read the names of all 106. In addition, those that were completed, there were those that were being constructed, as I say, that have been left to the bushes and to the vagrants and to the elements. So you ask me, why didn't I do it? I think we did a lot. In education, for the economy, national security, bringing crime down, and road and bridge infrastructure. We were famous. They used to call us the box rain government. I don't know if anybody remembers that. I'm proud at least we were able to do box rain with the flooding. Look what's happening now with the flooding. It just drizzles. Port of Spain is now, they used to laugh at us in the Southland, say we come from the lagoon and the swampland, and now Port of Spain is flooding with the slightest bit of rain. So why didn't I do it in those 5 years? We did as much. Of course, we could always do more. There's always room for improvement. But we did a tremendous amount in the health sector as well. In almost every sector we performed in those first 5 years.
Reflecting once again on crime, do you believe Gary Griffith in of himself as a personality was a solution to crime?
Well, I wouldn't use the word solution. I'd say Gary has his ways. He's a very talkative person, as I am sometimes, but he did a good job. He was one of our ministers of national security during my term of office, and we brought that crime down, as I'm saying. He was part of that and helped us. And then when he was commissioner, we didn't have the sense of lawlessness and the rampant crime that we're having now for that period of time. To say he was a solution, I say he was a good commissioner of police, and in my term, he was a good minister of national security. And I still think he has a lot to offer the country when it comes to dealing with national security issues.
And of course, let's just say the UNC does win the next general election. Would he have a role in the fight against crime?
He will have a role. I will not say specifically now. Those are matters open for discussion. But certainly he is part of our government. There will be a role for him. He's a very creative and a very competent person in his own right.
So, Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, in the lead up to the local government election, of course, on the campaign trail, you made some comments as it related to crime and home invasions. Light them up, empty the clip. It received mixed reactions, but also a fair amount of criticism. Do you stand by those statements in reflection?
I stand by those statements. At the moment, a homeowner is defenseless. You say there are laws, but the laws are not in favor of a homeowner defending his wife or homeowner defending husband and children. You are defenseless. And therefore, in the United States, many of their states, they have the stand your ground laws, which gives a person in your own home and in your castle, that's your castle, which gives you that right to defend yourself and your family. You don't wait until they reach up in front of your door and put the gun next to your head, and then you say, oh, please, I can now knock you down. So the existing laws is that you must use reasonable force, and there must be reasonable suspicion that the person means you harm. But should a stranger enter your home, it is clear they come with no good intention. And therefore, laws need to be revised so that you can stand your ground to defend your home and your family. When I said light them up and empty the clip, of course, if a man is there over your wife, raping your wife, what are you going to do? Empty the clip. And I want you to think about if you have a child, someone is there raping your daughter. What do you do? Stand up and watch and say, no, no, the law says I must use reasonable force. I'll push him over with my hand. No, I stand by empty the clip. And I stand by also giving law-abiding citizens the right to bear arms. So those are laws we need to change. That a man comes with a gun into your home, what do you have? What do you have? Your two bare hands, what are you going to do? The right to bear arms. Of course, there will be the circumstances in which you'll be given those. The various, safety areas, if you call it that. So first of all, you must not have a criminal record. Secondly, you will be given some kind of psychiatric test as well. Whether you do it yourself or it is one, you will be required to go through some psychological examination so that you're not giving guns to madmen. As I said, the law will have areas within which to ensure safety and security. But while the criminal could go out there and get a gun without any restriction, I think law-abiding citizens should also have that right to bear arms in our country.
What about responses to statements like those, like even the Prime Minister, who would say that putting more guns on the street, out in the public, is not a solution?
Well, I don't agree with him, obviously. I do not agree with him. I think a citizen of our land should have the right to defend themselves, one, and be given the tools necessary to defend himself or herself. Clearly, we have a different perspective on this issue of gun ownership by law-abiding citizens. I do not agree with the Prime Minister's position that putting more guns on the streets. The guns are out there, whether you want to believe it or not. Why doesn't the Prime Minister's government look to preventing the flow of those guns into our country? Because we don't make them. Those guns are coming here illegally. What have we done to stem the tide? I remember the Prime Minister promised in our country to set up some kind of bridge or net or wall, a maritime wall. He said it was maritime wall to stop the inflow. You've been there 8 years going on 9, and the guns continue to flow into Trinidad and Tobago. You failed in that regard. So therefore, citizens must have the right, law-abiding, to defend themselves.
Do you think those statements, as emphatic as they were, affected the UNC at the polls?
I think we did better in the polls than we did before. In the last, I think it helped us because people are terrified in this country, you know. People are scared to walk the street. They're scared in their home. You know, last time I'm hearing a noise and I'm waking up my husband, Greg, what is that? And I have a little puppy. Puppy started barking. She barks for every little noise. Greg, what could that possibly be? And it thought, because it was a sound coming from the ceiling. I said, could this be some invader? Thank God it wasn't. You can imagine you're in your home, as I say, with your family, I come back to it again. And I think that the fear that our citizens are living in and kinds of solutions that we were offering on the platform resonated with a large proportion of the voter population. That is why we got more votes than the government, in spite of the fact that we did 21 less seats. We contested 21 less seats. They contested all the seats. Yet we got about, what was I think, 43,000 more votes, yes, than government. So yes, the answer is yes. Because people want solutions now. They don't want to come crying. And I remember in that campaign, it was so hilarious for us in our party that the government keeps saying, but they're not talking about local government. They're not talking about local government. They're talking about everything else. But everything else matters. Everything else matters. So when they were trying to restrict me to talk about borough status in Superior or Lego Martin, as I said, total fallacy. Nothing has changed and nothing will change because there's no difference between a borough and a regional corporation. They said, but you must talk about local government reform. What? When was local government election and all this reform talk? Do you know out of that piece of law they passed for local government reform, only one section they have proclaimed to this date, and that was the one to postpone the local government elections. Thank God for the Privy Council, and thank God for lawyers like Anand Ram Logan, who took the case right up, and we said, you must, according to law, you have to call the elections. So my answer to is yes, our messaging resonated because people want solutions to the ills and the anxieties they are experiencing and stressing out. Another thing we talked about is the gated communities on the local platform. I see people are fighting really hard up in Aranguez, it's around Bamboo, for their, to get a gated community, and other areas, of course, in Valsain, our treasurer of our party, Neil Gosain, he worked there with residents. He's the president of a particular part of Valsain, and they got a gated community. We are working with several persons here. I had promised we will work with you where we have UNC corporations to help you get a gated community, and we have several applications. One, I was told last week, right here in our corporation, has been approved, of course, subject to certain conditions that the residents will have to fulfill. So some of those things we've already mentioned, in addition to the gated communities and other messaging in our campaigning, I think resonated well for us with the voters.
This may be a good point for us to take a quick break. So to our viewers, we'll be right back. Welcome back to our viewers. We are continuing our discussion with Leader of the Opposition, Kamla Persad-Bissessar. So Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, burning topic, not just in our country, but across the region, is the Venezuela-Guyana controversy over the Essequibo region. Of course, the UNC has been quite vocal about it. Foreign Affairs Minister Dr. Amory Brown, of course, said that the UNC doesn't have a place. Does the UNC have a voice in this matter?
We most certainly have a voice, and we should have a voice. If we back up a little bit, rewind, in 2015, when I was still Prime Minister, a similar claim arose from Venezuela, claiming territorial waters of Guyana. And I stood with then President Granger very clearly and said that Venezuela has no claim to those. Venezuela should adhere to the international rule of law, international court rulings, and should just lay off. Now, it was interesting, when they proclaimed, Venezuela presidential decree was proclaimed about the territorial waters of Guyana, it was in the run-up to an elections. They were having an elections. Once again, in the run-up to another election, and then the war drums are beating and the trumpets are blowing and so on, calling to invade. So it's a good thing that, you know, dictators have a way, they play on, focusing on nationalism, and therefore getting the Venezuelan people worked about nationalism and about taking back this land that they say belong to them. If we look at the history of it, it is clear that they do not have a proper legal claim to the land. From since 1899, they signed these agreements. Then our colonial powers signed, Spain and Britain. And that's how Guyana was given this piece of land. Legally, they signed the agreements, and they continue, what is it, 100 years, 1899, 1999, coming down the road another 20-something years, and they continue to lay claim from the land. They refer to a Geneva Agreement to give them credence, to say, yes, this land is ours. That agreement, the Geneva Agreement, was later down the road. And it's interesting, in that Geneva Agreement, there is a clause which says that if there is continued dispute about anything, they will succumb to the ICJ. And that's where the matter is now, is before the International Criminal Court, and they should await the ruling of that court. At the moment, if they decide to invade, they will be breaching international law, all the tenets of international law. So we wait to see if they will continue in this mode. We'll wait to see if they really do go in. I am totally of the view, and our party totally believes, we have to stand side by side with Guyana. You know, Dr. Eric Williams in his day also operated as a mediator. Trinidad and Tobago, you know, we were #1 out there in foreign policy. The minister now, the foreign minister of our country, is now saying they will not intervene, they will not mediate, they will not intercede. What madness is that? That is madness. Venezuela is next door to us. We are part of the family of CARICOM, of which Guyana is part of it. Our first duty has to be to CARICOM. And Eric Williams endorses that thereafter, Trinidad and Tobago is at the forefront in diplomacy and policy making. If we have a relationship with both countries, what is wrong with us interceding, seeking to mediate? Because we have friendships with both. He talks about, what is it, a zone of peace. Well, if you want a zone of peace, let's mediate. We are not intervening to fire missiles. We are saying, hey, let's talk. If you really want, I'm shocked to hear him. I saw him on the news recently, might have been last night or the night before, saying, we will not mediate, we will not intercede. I think that is madness. We are poised in such a good position because of our good diplomatic relations with the Guyana over the years and with Venezuela, and our present relationships with Venezuela with respect to dragon gas, that we are in an ideal position to try to get the parties, let's talk, not fight.
Of course, it's a huge discussion. A lot of persons have been weighing in, and if I could reference Mariano Brown, economist, he of course said that Trinidad and Tobago will be foolish to try to jeopardize our economic benefit that we could get from Venezuela through the dragon gas deal and so on by even trying to intervene.
I am saying we must make sure. Well, to intervene means what? That we send troops? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we are poised diplomatically, that there could be discussions where we can maintain our good relations with Venezuela and with Guyana. That's one point. Dragon gas, will we jeopardize it? We are not sending troops. Let's hope it doesn't ever come to that. What we are saying is we should attempt to negotiate and mediate. They're both our friends. They're our neighbors. If you want a true zone of peace, then what you need to do is talk. You must talk. Just play badger and leave it alone. I think we have been ostriches, burying our heads in the sand by saying we will not intervene, we will not mediate. I think we should do that. What can we do? Does the UNC have a voice? Of course we always have a voice. As the loyal opposition of our country, we have a voice to put forward our positions. We will not have the authority or the power should the worst come to the worst. And then the third point about jeopardizing the dragon gas deal, I think we should ensure that whatever deal comes through, and I hope it comes through because we badly need it, that we should put in some kind of conditions there that whatever revenue that the Maduro government gets, that it will not be used to buy arms and ammunition to use against our neighbors in Ghana. I think those are some of the areas, but we have raised our voices. How do we ensure that? One way is by talking about it, of course, because if you don't speak it, you will not know it or even think it. And the other way is for us to lobby internationally, which is already happening. So the more voices that are raised, you will form a conglomeration of persons against such a move, to put pressure. That's most you can do, is to put pressure on Venezuela to cease and desist.
I think the public personality of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro is that anyone who may even seek to mediate and so on may be viewed as an opposer, someone who is opposing his move and his stance. And the ball seems to be in his court as it relates to energy deals with Trinidad and Tobago, because we had to do a lot of lobbying and negotiating as a country with Venezuela just to get their agreement. So it seems very easy to offend President Maduro.
I will not attempt to speak of his personality, okay, to deal with that issue. But you're right, he seems to have the upper hand in that regard. But there's a very powerful nation sitting right next to our doorstep, which is the United States of America. Remember, this Dragon gas deal is not just about Venezuela. It also involves the U.S. And the U.S., I see, is already making moves. They're already speaking about this, and they will be part of the international lobby against Maduro and his aggression. Brazil is another country, is very averse, very against the aggression from Venezuela. So yes, Venezuela may seem to have the upper hand because they have to sign this agreement, but the U.S. is also part of it, and the U.S. is a very powerful nation. We'll have to see if the U.S. is willing to stand idly by and allow the aggression from Venezuela into tiny Guyana.
Given that the United States have already presented themselves as allies of Guyana, and we seem to be more or less sitting on the fence. Yes, we have agreed with CARICOM, but we are
sitting on the fence. This government is sitting on the fence.
Do you believe in that case that our position may affect our relationship with the United States?
That is left to be seen, and I will not doubt it. I will not doubt it could affect. If the U.S. takes a particular direction, the U.S. is one of our major trading partners. It's going to affect us. You know, I lived in Jamaica at a particular time. It might be slightly related or not. There was a time when I lived in Jamaica as a student, and then I was lecturing at the university, and a fellow by the name of Prime Minister Manley was in government. And Manley allied himself as a group, they call themselves the Non-Aligned Movement. And the rest is history, what happened to Jamaica. The U.S. blockaded. We would go to the supermarket, people would be fighting, they'll put up about 10 packs of rice, people would be fighting, grabbing the rice. There was a blockade. So everything that you needed, basic things, were just not left. So the U.S. doesn't have to send an army, you know. They have economic ways that it can affect a country. So I will not doubt, should we go contrary to the direction or strategy of the U.S., it could have serious implications for our development here and our economy, and of course for the livelihood of persons in our country.
As a Caribbean leader yourself, how do you see this situation panning out?
I'm praying that it pans out in the zone of peace. But I will not, you know, as I say, be an ostrich and say, well, okay, they're not really going to fight. Maduro is in election mode and is trumpeting and beating the drums and so on. I do hope not just Trinidad and Tobago, but the CARICOM, which has such a great bond with Guyana, that we should in some way intercede with negotiations and with talks before it gets anywhere else. At the moment, it can go either way, any which way. I am still of the view, and I'm still hoping that Maduro is just into election mode, and therefore, you know, coalescing his troops and the people in Venezuela at this point in time. I would like to ask you, how do you see it panning out?
That's an interesting question, because I'm quite aware of the risks and the wider implications for the Caribbean and Trinidad and Tobago being quite close to both those territories. We're seeing intensified action. President Maduro a couple of days ago gave his government instructions to go ahead and exploit and explore the Essequibo. He gave Guyanese, persons with Guyanese licenses 3 months to vacate the Essequibo. So he seems to be intent on taking control of the Essequibo, and that part scares me.
Well, you know, part of the history is you cannot find anything Venezuelan in that part of the region that he's claiming. 1899, so many years ago, the agreement was signed with the colonial powers, and today there is not one iota, not one little thing as hey, that's Venice. That looks like there's nothing that they actually settled the area. You are seeing panning out that you think he might really go forward with the aggression. But I think there's still time for intercession, interventions, and non-violent ones for us and other international bodies to bring pressure to bear before it actually reaches the invasion of the Guyanese piece of territory.
Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, it's now time for another quick break. Welcome back to our viewers. We are continuing our discussion with Opposition Leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar. Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, we're seeing maps being circulated. It's being suggested that it was published by the Venezuelan government, which includes Trinidad as part of its territory.
Years ago, our first Prime Minister, Dr. Williams, had spoken about that and about the designs of Venezuela on Trinidad territory. So it is something we must keep conscious all the time. Should they decide to invade Venezuela, should Venezuela decide to invade Guyana, what is to stop them from similarly attempting to invade TNT? And the fact that we have to sign papers with them and they have to get things for us to sign for Dragon Gas Field, they could just invade us and take the Dragon Gas Field, take all of it. Not just their part of it, but also ours. So again, we have to be very conscious. This thing is not just about Guyana. It is also about Trinidad and Tobago. I said on Monday night, if you touch one in Guyana, you also touch in Trinidad and Tobago. Stay out of Guyana. I maintain that view because we are also at risk.
Reflecting on your term as Prime Minister, is there anything that you would do differently?
There are some things I would do differently. There were certain policy decisions that we took that I walked back on, a few of them, because there was such an outcry from the population for certain things that we were proposing. Some of those I wish I had gone forward with, because I see this government, whether people cry or they laugh, they don't stop their policy positions. And some of those positions would have been better for us, you know. There's always room for improvement, Rashi. There's so much more we could have done. The one regret, as I say, we had talked about passing, Kevin reminded me of this recently, you know. We were looking to do fixed date elections. Then we were looking for fixed date elections, 2 terms for a Prime Minister, and proportional representation. Some of those we did walk back on, and there's some things I think we can revisit as we go forward. Regrets as well. I took a very strong policy position. Maybe it was right, it was wrong, but I thought it was a principled stand that if there was someone sitting in the cabinet, no member of their family should be allowed to sit on a state board. So even though we had qualified persons, I didn't want a family connection. I mean, right now we have the husband, we speak of the houses, sitting on several boards and very important boards. Several family members of the PNM ministers are sitting on various boards and whatever. That was something I took a very strong stand against, and some of them some of them have been telling me I should not have done that, but it was a principled stand because it's a kind of conflict of interest, as a kind of enclave, you know, you're just holding down everything inside. So that was another area some people feel I should have dealt with differently.
Do you think you were judged differently?
Of course.
Why?
Right now, I could tell you, Cameron, take a shot of my shoes, please. Don't. Was there any male Prime Minister that they put front page? I think it's your media group, by the way. Front page, my shoes. They were beautiful shoes, by the way. But really, and at the same time, Theresa May had become Prime Minister around the same, and the same thing was happening to her. So I was judged differently as a female leader, definitely. And maybe I was judged differently for the things that people felt they should publicize. So if I go somewhere, instead of talking about what I was doing or what I was saying, shoes. Have you ever seen a shoe of any other Prime Minister on a front page? No. Maybe tomorrow somebody will go and take one and show us, but no. So that is a kind of a ridiculing the differences, you know. Most certainly I was judged very differently, but by others in some things I was judged very fairly. So a politician, you get it both ways. It never stopped me from doing what I had to do.
How do you feel about Caribbean integration?
Well, we have a kind of Caribbean integration now with the CARICOM, but it seems to be more in writing than in implementation. And for years we've been talking about it, it just hasn't been happening. We have the talk shops every year, you have the CARICOM heads meeting. Look, we had a CARICOM heads of meeting here when recently talking about what? Crime, crime, crime. Has anything come out of that? So we seem to use that integration, if I understand your use of the word correctly, but it's only on lip service. You meet, the guy said, I'm going to eat and drink, and then there is no implementation of any decision taken there. The issue of CARICOM integration is good. It's a good in principle, because there are a few things that we have benefited from. So that where we have the certain taxes and, you know, putting whatever on goods coming from externally, the CT and so on, you have certain things that will work good for us, that we could stand together. Further, as an integrated region, we can bargain, you know, have stronger bargaining power in getting certain things done. But I think we pay more lip service than, as I say, how we should implement what we have.
What were some of the challenges you faced as a female leader?
Apart from issues, apart from issues, what challenges did I face? Well, as a female leader, but as a leader, first I was a leader of 5 parties, you know. So when we sat in that cabinet, it's 5 different parties. So one challenge was, first of all, how do you make everybody feel included and, you know, equally treated? There were challenges with that as well. I've sat in my cabinet, you know, sometimes I used to say, and I'm sure everybody who sat in that cabinet will feel upset with me, but sometimes it was like children dealing with children, you know, all the children want equal. Or if you smile with you and I don't smile with you, and it happens still up to now, some people still think I don't talk enough to them. I try my best to talk with all of them to keep us together. So I'm sorry I use the analogy of children, but in the cabinet sometimes it felt like that they'll be fighting them down, and maybe that's not being a female leader, maybe that's just being a leader with so many diverse groups. So that was a serious challenge. But look, we held it together till the last day. My government did not collapse. We held it for the entire 5-year period. We stayed together. Some may have dropped out, some may have been put out, but we held the government together for a 5-year period.
Quite recently, there have been rumors about your health and so on. Are you, without being too invasive, are you at a position to tell us if you have any major ailments? What is your...
I have made it public long ago that I am diabetic, and that is my major issue. I know recently they said I'd lost my toes and fingers, so again, you may have to take a picture of the toes, because I have all 10 toes and all 10 fingers certainly on me. So my only health challenge is that I'm diabetic, but so are many other persons. Unfortunately, my husband is good as a doctor. He doesn't practice anymore, but Kamla, check the sugar, check the sugar. So every day he'll come, check the sugar. And that's my challenge there. If it's high, you take some insulin. If it's not high, well, you smile and continue for the rest of the day. So I really don't have any major health challenges. Of course, as an older person, you have the normal problems of a person who gets a little bit older. Sometimes, you know, you sit down too long and you can't stand up. That's not true. I'm just making it, being facetious with you. I have no major health issues. I will not go and run a 10-mile marathon, for example. But in terms of the work I have to do in campaigning and doing the meetings, holding the consultations, whatever I have to do, those challenges do not affect me. So I can give you that assurance. And for those who are concerned, I still have all 10 fingers and all 10 toes. And I'm not in I didn't fall into any coma or anything like that. I've been, thank God, in fairly good health.
And as of course you reflect on life, you reflect on your career, you reflect on your public life, next election, win or lose, what sort of legacy would you like to leave for the future of Trinidad and Tobago?
The legacy which I started to build and I will continue to build lies in education. That has been closest to my heart, maybe because I was an educator myself. As you may know, I lectured both at the Mona campus at the university. I lectured here for a while, and before that I was a teacher. And to me, I say it all the time, it's become like a stock phrase, education is your only passport out of poverty. Education is a key to a better quality of life. I have come from a very poor background growing up, and the things that have made me get a better quality of life is because of my education. So my legacy has been in education. I began it under the Pandey government with Mr. Pandey's full approval. He was also very keen on assisting children. And we began there with the dreaded SE, which was then called the Common Entrance. I see now there are a lot of comments come in. The youth parliament debated about the SCA, against the SCA. But at that time, we had the common entrance exam and all the ills of the common entrance, and we revised that, and I came up with this SCA, Secondary Education Assessment. There were components of it that are now not being kept any further. So it had to do with, instead of just having this one-off exam, you had a continuous assessment program that was to go along with it. That is not happening. But we got rid of that SCA. But more important than getting rid of that SCA was finding a place in secondary school for every single child. That was a tremendous challenge. I faced some flack from some persons because we made sure not a child was left behind. So that area of education, you know, after that, when I became the Prime Minister, the laptop program, I'm very proud of that laptop program. And should this government have continued it, all the COVID challenges we had, you know, would not have happened because every child would have had a device to keep you linked and in contact with being education. I think that was a serious error on the part of the government to discontinue the laptop program. And then, of course, with scholarships, in the area of scholarships, we increased the number of scholarships. We increased the tertiary level participation at the University of the West Indies. And I'm very proud to say, in the last moments that we may have, that I meet children now who are no longer children. And they say, you know, I still have the laptop you gave me. And they're so proud to tell me, I'm so happy I still have this laptop. One young man told me, he said, you know, I still have this laptop. I'm attending university now, and I use this laptop. So I'm very proud of that program. Should we go back into government, there's so many other things we could do in the education sector. Again, education is your only passport out of poverty. And that will be a great legacy, if at all it endures.
Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, I want to thank you so much for inviting us into your office, into your hometown, you know, expressing yourself. Really thank you for this sit-down conversation. Thank you for taking the time to share with us and, of course, to share with the national public.
I thank you very much for this opportunity, and I say in case I don't speak to you on live television again, I want to wish you all a very blessed Merry Christmas in this holy season that we are. Thank you very much for your time.